Hope everyone can hear me all right. My name is Samantha Shokin. I'm the manager at public programs here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to say a few words about the museum. The Museum of Jewish Heritage is the leading New York institution dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism and bigotry, using our exhibitions, programming, and educational resources for schools. We are proud to have welcomed more than 2 million visitors to the museum, trained thousands of teachers, and educated hundreds of thousands of students. In engaging with history, people of all ages and backgrounds inherit our mission to never forget. If you're interested in receiving information about upcoming programs, exhibitions, and special offers, please join our mailing list. A sign-up sheet is at the table in the back. I also invite you to become a member and join the museum's vibrant community. Membership brochures can also be found on the table. I'm delighted to present our speaker for today, Heather Dune Macadam, author of the newly released 999, The Extraordinary Young Women of the First Official Jewish Transport to Auschwitz. Heather Dune's first book, the memoir Irena's Promise, was co-authored with the 716th woman sent to Auschwitz and published in 1995, going on to become an international bestseller. In 2011, Heather Dune founded the Irena's Promise Foundation with the mission of creating a world unhindered by prejudice, racism, or hatred. Her work has been recognized by numerous international Holocaust memorial institutions, including Yad Vashem and the USC Shoah Foundation. Heather has been published by the New York Times, National Geographic, among others, and has been featured on NPR. I'm also pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Lori Weintraub. As founding director of the Wagner College Holocaust Center in Staten Island, Lori has connected local survivors face-to-face with more than 5,000 youth of all faiths in the tri-state area. She is co-author of the original play, Rise Up, Young Holocaust Heroes, premiering at the St. George Theater in April of this year. She is currently editing Eyewitness to History, Documents of the Holocaust, and has received numerous awards for community building and interfaith and social justice activism. After the program, we will have a book signing in the lobby downstairs. Heather's books, 999 and Irena's Promise, are both available in the museum bookshop. Before we begin, I would like to ask you to please take a moment to silence your mobile devices to avoid disruptions during the program. Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Heather Dune.
How's that? Ooh, ah. Hi, everybody. We have a wonderful group of guests here tonight, and many of them I've never met before, and some of them have come with more stories, which it's been an amazing week. I just want to say there was a big piece in the Times of Israel, and I've been hearing from families all over the world, and I just found another survivor who is 96 and living in Sydney. And who I'm now going to go to Australia so I can interview her and get her story. But I want to present the people I knew were coming for sure, and then I'm going to make the rest of you stand up. Oh, I have to make this move while I'm doing this. Oops. Let's see. Is that moving? Oops, I have to turn it the other way. All right. Do I have to point it? Where do I point it? Oh, there it goes. Okay, here we go. So this is Rena and Danka Kornreich's children. So Sarah Cohen, you can stand up. This is Danka's daughter, and Robert Gallison is Rena's son. And then we have some other families, come on, from the Gallison and Brendel family here. And I just have to say that we have this fabulous picture here. This is Jenna at the Museum of Jewish Heritage at the Auschwitz exhibit. And she just saw her grandmother at the exhibit the other day. All right, you can sit down. I'm done embarrassing you. Then we have Bertha Berkowitz's family here. This is Naomi Ikovich and Bertha's sister, Fanny, who was 15 months Older. And we will hear from Fanny a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, you were older. Yeah. And these are, sorry, we can't dim the lights. I apologize. But we have two wonderful photos right here. This is Fanny and Bertha, just very early pre-war, and then obviously more post-war. Or I'm sorry, both are post-war. And here, this is Irena Zuckerman, who ended up living in Cleveland and was one of Bertha's best friends. And I have a strange little relationship with her name. Rena and I spoke to her back when we were working on Rena's memoir. And then I lost complete contact with her. And when I started working on this book, I got Naomi knew her daughter, and I was able to connect with Elena's family again, which was really wonderful, really meaningful to me. Thank you so much. Susie, where's Susie? Oh, you moved. I handed you right there. Sorry. We're going to have to come back to this picture, but this is one of my favorite photographs in the book, and this is the matzah-making picture of the Berkowitz family. And we'll come back to this so that, or maybe we should do it right now because we're here. Fanny, yeah. Can you tell us about the people in the picture, the Einhorns and the Berkowitz family?
Yes, there is my mother in a black.
That's your mom?
Yes, my mother. No, the other one. The other one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
This is my mother. The other one is a neighbor. Also, this was from Kapishova, and the girl also Kapishova. She her sister is on this side.
Here.
And this.
No, there. You do.
This.
Yeah. So this is Bertha.
Yeah, this is my sister.
Pesci Steiner, right? Pesci Steiner was Bertha's best friend.
The what?
Pesci Steiner.
Pesci Steiner. Yeah.
So
Pesci Steiner.
Pesci was on the first transport with
Yeah.
Bertha, and she did not survive, but she did save Bertha's life.
Yeah.
All right, then we have two other. This is one of your sisters?
This is my sister.
And this is a sister?
No, this is my sister. This and this. And I have.
Who's this, Mom?
This is Leia.
This is,
Martel.
so Martha was 15 months older than my mother. Now, you have this circle, but that's her brother.
Right, but this is her.
That's my brother there.
Who's this?
This is Bas. It's not it's Moti Bas.
Not Einhorn?
Oh yeah, oh this Einhorn, right? You're right.
And this is,
My brother.
Your
Herschel.
brother. Great.
that did not survive. This is also another.
This is my brother.
Right.
Volby.
Ballsy. Right. I thought this was Herschel. No, didn't Herschel survive? He went to Argentina before the war.
Yes.
Is that Herschel? Right. So
Yeah.
in this, the reason I circled these two people, they're the only two people who survived in this photograph from 1940 Passover, making
They know
matzah.
they hip us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Einhorn's Herschel, that was given in Toronto.
Oh. Oh, he went to Toronto.
No, not Toronto.
No.
Where was he?
Argentina?
Argentina.
Argentina. That's okay. Don't worry. Okay. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. We're going to come back to you, Fanny. So this is Susie. This is the Gross family. And Adela Gross, for those of you who've read Rena's Promise, you might remember that Rena saw Adela go to the gas chamber. And 70 years later, and Adela is sort of the reason I'm back in this subject matter, writing this book, as I was in Slovakia, and I connected to the Gross family. And they found out what had happened to Adela 70 years after she disappeared. So because of that, I became aware that there were so many other stories out there and so many more lost girls that I just felt really drawn to the material. And one of those lost girls, this is, so Edith Grossman married into the Gross family. So Dutzi is Deborah Gross's sister, and Edith is next to her, and that Deborah became her sister-in-law. And yeah, so this is Susie's family. And can the rest of the Gross family stand up? Oh, and I forgot, yeah, the Gross family, there you go, yeah. And I'm sorry, and Samara, sorry, she's named after Adela. And they came from Montreal, right? Did I get that right? And I have to go back to the Berkowitz family. Come on, Lautmans, come on, Ikovich family. This is the rest of the Berkovich family, yeah. Isn't it amazing? It's just incredible. One of our lost girls, Diane, this is Diane Young, and her Magda and Olga Hartman are your, Magda would have been your aunt. Yeah. Yeah. And the Museum of Jewish Heritage, so when I first met Diane, she told me, you can sit down, I'm making you uncomfortable. When I first met Diane, she told me about this amazing postcard that came out of Birkenau, and it basically said, Magduska is fine, she's with Uncle Kaddish. So I've been looking for that postcard. Now her father in the USC Shoah Foundation testimony talks about the card, but I haven't been able to actually find the actual card. There are about 30 cards in Yad Vashem that the Hartmans donated, and then there's about 10 here at Museum of Jewish Heritage. So I came here, I got to look at them, they're amazing, and I put them in the book because they tell us a story that we haven't known before, and that is this conversation between Lenka Hertzka, whose mother was living with your aunts and uncles, or great aunts and uncles actually, in Roshkovany in Slovakia. They had a farm. She was writing to them, and they would write her back, and they would say, tell Magda to write. Why isn't she writing, right? Why can't she be more like you? Well, Lenka was working for a Gestapo, and so she could receive mail. And meanwhile, Magda was dead. And there's a very, Lenka coded a lot of her postcards. And she keeps referring to Nutsi, Magduska and Nutsi. Nobody in the family knows who Nutsi is, but we know that she has to be Olga because they grew up together, right? They grew up on the same farm. And all I can figure out is that Nutsi is the code word for Olga is dead. But the family could never figure that out, right? So these two sort of haunt me because I don't know what happened, although I just learned last week that Magda died on November 11th, 1942. This is the Schwartz family. You got Celia and Val. The Schwartz sister, and can you point out the sisters for me? So Regina is Belle and Celia's mother. She looks like 14. She was, I know, she's still alive. Here.
Portrait. That's after the war. And this is right before the war. This is my grandmother's grave. That's their mother. What happened was she actually died when my mother was a toddler.
No, she wasn't a toddler, though. We were just there. She was 5.5 months old.
Okay. So she was 5.5 months old, and this before they were taken to Auschwitz was when they were actually putting the stone up. It took that long, and so they ended up going to pray around her grave. This is Magda, who was 2 years older than my mother. She just died on December 17th of this year. She survived Auschwitz. She and Silla, who died in 2005, who was 2 years older than Magda. This is Helen, who was the oldest sister and was due to get married, but that never happened, and she ended up dying, we believe, in Treblinka. They were taken to Treblinka and died. and this is Nutti, Nathan, who also ended up dying. We're not sure exactly where, but died in the war. And this is my mother. So these three sisters were all on the first transport with numbers 1064.
Where my mother's number at 1064, 1065, 107, I think.
No, they were in a row, Celia. They're- Yeah, yeah.
Can I just mention that I just came back from Michalovce, and we have a family picture. So for some reason in Michalovce, the cemetery is absolutely intact and absolutely well taken care of. There are no Jews in the town, but they're taken care of. And I have the identical picture with my children sitting on the grave and me. And this in the background is exact. There's no change in it whatsoever. Yeah, and it's just and my husband. And we had a very good tour guide, if anyone wants to go, who has all the keys to all the cemeteries and the synagogues and whatever. But that particular town took it upon themselves to absolutely take care. There's nothing, there's no graffiti, no broken headstones, and it's perfect, so.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is Ida Egerman and Sharon Ehrlich, goodness, and Tammy Verstatter. They just gave me instructions on how to pronounce their names. And their mom. Now, Ida was from Nowy Sad, Poland, and I am now quite certain that she knew Rena Kornreich because they were staying in Slovakia, not even a block away from each other. And Rena was hiding in her aunt and uncle's shop that was right on the main square, and Ida's uncle had the kosher butcher around the corner, and across the street was the synagogue, where you heard that beautiful music. Tammy and Sharon traveled with me through Poland and Slovakia to Auschwitz on the 75th anniversary of the first transport. It was an incredible trip. We found Uncle Jacob Schutzer's house, which was amazing that it was there. And we also discovered while we were there that Celia Schutzer had survived the Holocaust. And Rena and the family, the Kornreich family, had no idea. And Celia was in Israel. She's gone now. But this is what, to me, one of the tragedies is that people were so separated that they never found each other again. And it, standing there and seeing that happen. But Sharon and Tammy and Tammy's daughter, Daniela, we were in the synagogue, and they started to sing in the women's section. And it was the most beautiful moment. I just always am transported. It was an amazing trip, and that little synagogue and you guys singing. Yeah.
Let me say that I would encourage all of us to go for the 80th anniversary of that transport, because it was an unbelievable trip. One of the highlights and one of the saddest times of my life.
Yes.
But we had a good time, too. We ate a lot of poppy seed strudel and dumplings. Slovakia's got great food. Yeah, so, ta-da. And now we have Ella Ruttman and her sisters. Rosette, you want to stand up? And Donna. So this is the related, this is Donna Steinhorn, is your cousins, right? No, married into the family. And Darina. Right, so Lily, first of all, this is Rosette's mother. No, that's not? Oh, over here. And then which one's? On this end. Okay, that is your aunt. And then these are the three sisters, and it's so blurry I can't tell which one's Lily. Do we know which one is your mother? This one's Lily, right? And then no. Second from the left. This is Lily.
No, this is
Oh,
Lily. That's my
right.
mother, and that's Edith.
Okay.
And I think that's my mother. I think that's mine. Are you sure?
That's Lily. It's two.
Edith, yeah.
Yeah. We didn't have digital cameras back then.
Just a correction.
Yes.
So my mother was on the transport.
Right.
She was 1,000 1984.
Right.
My father was their parents' uncle, and my mother met Edith in Auschwitz. They became best friends, and after the war, Edith introduced my mother to her uncle and became her best friend's aunt.
It keeps unraveling. And then we have these amazing photographs down here. And this is from the family album. And I'm going to try and get out of your way while you're filming this. So this family, the Friedman sisters were liberated by the Swedish Red Cross. It's a really pivotal moment in the book. And we found just last spring, sort of unearthed all of these photos. And what we discovered is Joan Rosner is number 1188. We, of course, have no idea if they knew each other, but they probably did, because they have very similar stories. But one of the things you find in the USC Shoah Foundation when they talk is they may not mention a name, or they may say a nickname, they may not say the last name, so it's hard to sort of put all this together. And then Matilda Friedman, she was a survivor. She wrote a book that came out in France and in Slovak. And I love this one, because this is 10 Days in Freedom. And that's Lily, right? And that's Edith, and that's Ella. So I just love these archival photographs. And then we have a couple of other people in the audience. Tell us who you are.
I'm Alan Friedman. I'm Rhea and Magda Hans's nephew.
And that's a really amazing story in the book. And I've always felt this deep connection to the Hans in photos, and to finally meet a family member is incredibly moving. And there you are. Can you introduce yourselves too?
I'm Tom Gold. My mother, Mira Kornhauser Gold, was in the second transport, but she was very friendly with number of the first transport. Kleiman Gutman from Bratislava, Kulik Margaret, we used to call Heike.
Who's Peggy in the book?
Peggy in the book.
And then
Linda Reich. And two of my mother cousins, which you have a picture there. One, it's Kaufman, Friedman, Piri, we used to call her Piri, with her son Yitzhak, you have that. And I don't think so you have a picture of Zlata, who is number one on the list. Zlata Kaufman. Yeah, because she passed away. She ended up to be in Berlin, and she passed away when she was very young, like 50, 55. So
thank you. Thank you. Is there anybody else who's here who I don't know, who didn't introduce themselves to me, who's has a relative that was on the first transport that wants to? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Dagmar.
My name is Dagmar Foderman, and my mother and my aunt were both taken together on the first transport. And one of the things I have to say about life is that we never know how things play out. Do you have 2 minutes to listen to a story, or is that too much?
Probably too much, but
Okay.
give us their names.
My mother was Serena Stern, and her sister was Anna Stern.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Lori, it's your turn.
I'm almost tempted to start by saying how many other people in the room are second or third generation Holocaust survivors, and plus the ones who are parts of the book. Yeah, quite a lot. Thank you for coming and for all the work that you do, and thank you, Heather. It's my great pleasure to be part of the presentation of this important book, as well as the reunion of these families who have committed to the legacy of remembrance. Even as we commemorate this month the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, there is still so much that remains beyond comprehension about the final solution. Further, we are shocked that in 2019, as the Claims Conference reports, 41%, or nearly half of all Americans, cannot say what Auschwitz is. 2/3, or 66% of millennials, cannot identify Auschwitz. Along with rising anti-Semitism, it makes the efforts of Heather Dune Macadam, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, the Wagner College Holocaust Center in Staten Island, and all of us vital to educate the next generation. And I urge all of you to reach out to legislators and promote the passage of the Never Again Act to make Holocaust education mandatory in the United States. Thank you. In her book, Heather has captured how about 2 weeks after the first transport arrives in Auschwitz, many of these Slovakian Jewish women attempted to celebrate Passover. Indeed, it was exactly 2 years after the photo you just saw. Berta Berkowitz whispered the text of the Haggadah and avoided eating bread for a week. She said, quote, "I did this out of respect for my parents. This was my defiance. It was the only thing I was able to do." As Heather reports, quote, "Exhausted from cleaning swamps, demolishing buildings, clearing snow, carrying manure, and digging ditches, and with the echoing sounds of 12 Polish prisoners behind Block 10 who were shot, was anyone suffering more than they were at that moment?" And Helena Citron, one of the women on the first transport, number 1971, said, quote, Auschwitz was like 10 plagues a day." These are the extraordinary young women, the Jews deported by the Nazis and the Hlinka Guards in Slovakia, that Heather Dune Macadam has brought to life. Their words have finally been inscribed on the pages of history, testimony we all need to see. Heather had made sure that not only do we hear the memories of those who survived, we also find traces of those women who defied the Nazis with hunger strikes, smuggling or attempted escape, those beaten to death or sent to the gas chambers, as well as those dying of hunger, disease, and even suicide. Yet there is also sisterhood and relationships that give hope. Her book has already been translated into 12 languages. Is that correct? 14. When their train arrived at the gates of Auschwitz on March 26, 1942, nearly 1,000 Jewish women stepped out and became part of history. Edith, Magda, Elena, Regina, Linda, Ella, and many others, some as young as 16, wrote the opening lines of one of humanity's darkest chapters. And so Heather's work, 999, offers insights into understanding Auschwitz as a factory of death and a site of industrial-style killing. Heather Dune has asked, quote, "What is it like to be the first Jewish woman on the first day in Auschwitz, to see the barbed wire and pass the gate marked Arbeit macht frei, the brick buildings and the chimney?" Auschwitz was still a labor camp in March of 1942. It could be said that they were be fortunate to not be sent to the death camp of Belzec, which a week earlier had begun with no selections to kill all the Jews that arrived there. After the Wannsee Conference, the fate of the Jews was sealed with the final solution. The use of Zyklon B in the gas chambers of Auschwitz was initiated with the Soviet POWs in September of 1941. All of these young girls came from Slovakia, which had been a democracy, part of Czechoslovakia, the first nation outside of Germany to deport Jews, although France was only a few days behind. They had grown up in Slovakia with the exception of a few Polish Jewish refugees, like the subject of Heather's first book. These young unmarried women, aged 16 to 36, had received letters only a week earlier to commit to 3 months of government work service. In fact, the Slovakian government had agreed to pay the Nazis $200 each to take them away, and Adolf Eichmann reluctantly agreed. They became the very first Jewish women to arrive in Auschwitz. On the first day, they were shaved, disinfected, examined, forced to stand naked in the snow, given Russian POW uniforms, but not tattooed. As Edith said as she looked down after hiding her sanitary pads in the bunk, there was blood from invasive gynecological exams as well as menstruation. This book contributes to a new turn in Holocaust writing, the growth in recent years of literature on women and the Holocaust, with titles as the 2010 book, Sexual Violence Against Jewish Women During the Holocaust, the 2013 book, Different Horrors, Same Hell, Gender and the Holocaust, the 2017 book, Women in the Holocaust, A Feminist History, and the 2018 book, Women's Experiences in the Holocaust in Their Own Words. They joined the rare older title, such as the 1983 Women in the Resistance and the Holocaust, The Voice of Eyewitness by Holocaust survivor, non-Jewish Auschwitz survivor, Vera Laska. In these books, as in Heather's book, we hear in more depth about pregnancies, relationships, sexual assault, and sisterhood than in classic Holocaust narratives. As noted historian Doris Bergen writes, quote, "Gender analysis is indispensable in any effort to understand the Nazi construction of race and blood, because the systems of gender are so central to how people organize and give meaning to their worlds. The line dividing life and death, insider and outsider, ran directly through the bodies of women." As we will be discussing in a moment, as Heather and I discuss the book, these women made it through the first summer of the 90,000 Jews in Slovakia. By that summer, 50,000 had been sent to their death. Some of these women from the first transport survived 3 winters in Auschwitz. They became eyewitnesses to escalating horror, including in 1944, the deportation of the Hungarian Jews, when 12,000 Jews a day were killed in Auschwitz. 80 to 90% of those who arrived on the ramps were immediately sent to the gas chambers, including Elie Wiesel's mother and baby sister, Zipporah. These women were also eyewitnesses at the end of the war, in October of 1944, to the heroic uprising when the Sonder Commando blew up the crematoria with the help of 4 women. And so I will end my remarks with this remembrance of Rosa Robato and the three others who helped in smuggling the gunpowder, quoting from Edith. Sorry, I forgot Edith's last name. Edith Grossman, quote, "We had these 4 girls before our eyes all of the time." To me, this quote, like Bertha's celebrating of Passover by not eating bread, is symbolic of the hope and courage that Heather has captured in this very important book about the first female transport to Auschwitz. And now I look forward to our conversation to elaborate on these points. Thank you. Thank you again, Heather. Is this working? Okay. So you already showcased some of the amazing images and artifacts you used, including from the Museum of Jewish Heritage. Can you say a little bit more about both the most meaningful, moving objects and evidence that you found? One of the things about combating Holocaust denial is talking about the record, the historical record. I know you found lists with the women's names.
Yep. Good.
And some other very moving documents that we had talked about even before the young women were sent to Auschwitz as part of their journey. So can you tell us a little bit about the proof?
So I got a real bug about this guy whose name was Geza Konka. He is not one of the major people in the history. He gets referred to every once in a while. But when I was in Slovakia, actually, no, it was online, I found a deportation order that he had signed in the name of Alexander Mock, who was the head of the Minister of Interior. And I couldn't find anything on him. Nothing. 0. So I went to the Slovak National Archives and went through boxes and boxes of, of historic documents, and his name started showing up. And this is a telegram. Where's his name? It's around here. There it is. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Dr. Konka in Bratislava. And this is basically they're begging for Elzbieta Sternova to be not to be deported because she's important to their company. So it's a work telegram, and these telegrams started coming in asking for him to release these girls from the work. So that was one of those moments of I'm on to something. This guy has disappeared, and it's sort of, you know, when you're doing research, you get these sort of gut instincts. So I was able to find out a lot more about Konka and his position. We don't know everything about what he was involved in, but there is, we also have documents of the food, like how much the girls were allowed to eat, which turned out to be about the size of a tin of cat food per day. Horrifying, the amount of money that the Slovak government paid the Third Reich to take their Jews. This is not slavery, you sell a human being, right? This was, the government was paying them to get rid of them. This document is, I was trying to find information about Helena Citranova's sister, who is a very important part of the book. She was deported with her children, and her married name had changed because she had been married and then she'd been married again. And I contacted Yad Vashem sort of at loose end because I didn't know when she'd been deported, and I had been told something by the family and it didn't feel right. They sent me this document. This is her name. There's a number of other pieces with the document, so I'm quite sure it is her. She was deported from Hungary. Humana, where they lived, is very close to the Hungarian border, so it was very easy to slip over to Hungary to try and avoid deportation. And so this was the transport order. I had the date that she was deported. I was able to correct the information that I had been given, which was family information, but you know, often family information is not completely accurate. So I had the story, but I didn't have the dates, and that allowed me to do that. And then this is one of the Hartman postcards. And as you see, so we translated these. My husband's a good egg. He speaks German, so we translated all of these postcards from Yad Vashem and Museum of Jewish Heritage. And although you guys had already translated yours, actually, it was much easier. So this is December 12, 1942. Dear Lenka, this is coming from her mother to, so the address is to Birkenau. Probably you only just received my cards. Therefore, I represent everybody and write weekly. Everybody joins me in this letter. There is company here more often. We are with you in spirit with all of you. From Magduska, we await lines with impatience. Let her father know earliest. We are all healthy and quite busy. Best regards, M, Mama. And this is a series of postcards wondering why the girls, Olga or Nutsi in the cards, and Magduska are not writing. Why can't they be more like you, Lenka? You write all the time. And of course, Magda is already gone. So that's, that answer your question? And then this is footage of, on our trip in Slovakia. So Orna Tuckman, her mother was also from Prešov, and then she went on to Israel to Yad Vashem. And she actually found her family name in the archive right there. These are Prešov natives that did not survive. The great synagogue in Prešov is still there. It's quite extraordinary if you're ever in Slovakia. So that's her finding her mother's name and her family, the list of her family that didn't survive. And this is her and her son Gideon in Yad Vashem looking at the original list of the first transport at Yad Vashem in Israel and finding her mother's name on it.
Thank you. So one of the main sites in the book is, of course, Auschwitz. And can you talk about, in doing the research and thinking about the women's experience and the women's camp, both Auschwitz, I mean, particularly Auschwitz-Birkenau, once they moved there. I'm sorry, could you hear me? That I was asking about specific experiences that you didn't expect to hear about. I'm thinking about the women hiding Verba and others in the piles of clothing, things that, you know, surprised you about sisterhood, maybe the more positive, and then also about women perpetrators.
Right.
So some of the things that you found.
There's a number of stories, and I'll point out to Tammy and Sharon, their mother, they tell a wonderful story about their mother when she had typhus, and the girls, their mother was sorting clothes in what was called Canada, the sorting detail, and the girls would hide her in piles of clothes so she could be feverish and ill without getting caught and killed. And then when I was reading through Rudolf Verba's book, I Escaped Auschwitz, he tells the same story about the girls in Canada pulling him aside and hiding him in clothing. And you think, I mean, these are just two stories. How many times were girls, you know, helped and saved, and men, by being hidden? And I just love that people went out of their way to do that. And when we were in Auschwitz, Tammy and Sharon and I, going to the sauna where was a really powerful experience, and walking through. Canada's burned, so there's just cement piles there. You saw some pictures of your daughter walking along there, and there's just, you know, concrete slabs left, and sort of pondering what it was like. It's huge. There were like 40 barracks, I think, where they sorted the clothes. I think the most shocking thing, and it was, you know, I worked with Rena quite extensively, and she told me so many things, right? Everything. She swore me to secrecy on some things. And then, when I started to go through the Shoah Foundation testimonies, I kept hearing survivors talking about selections taking place in the nude. And they had to take off all their clothes and stand in the snow, or the heat, getting sunburned. This is something Rena never told me, ever. No, and I was shocked, and I went to Edith, and you know, it's like, you know, she was like, oh, sometimes, yeah, you know, but I didn't know that. I really didn't, and I found that quite horrifying, especially the pivotal moment on December 5th, 1942, when thousands of girls are selected to die, and they were forced to strip and stand in the snow all day long, 12 hours. So, yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Does everybody know who Rudolf Verba is? It might be worth.
Rudy. I know his daughter, Robin, now.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
So one of the 150 successful escapes from Auschwitz, and he's most responsible for bringing the first news of what was actually transpiring there. Among the first, a Jewish Slovakian chemist. And he said of the Slovakian Girls in Transport One that they lifted what little remained of my morale. That's taken from Heather's book. Was there any one in women's experiences that made you particularly angry or gave you deeper insight into the inhumanity of the Nazis?
Oh, I think that's the standing nude, definitely. That one really got all over me. But the other one is that these girls, that the Slovak government paid the Third Reich to take them. They didn't even sell them. You know, it's like that. And I was talking to somebody today on a radio interview, and you know, one of the big things that Edith spoke about is, you know, when you lose your period in Auschwitz, that was a good thing, right? Because, you know, you didn't have anything to stop it up anyway. She said, but you also felt less like a woman. So you're not only being forced to wear men's clothes, they were wearing Russian men's uniforms. And you have to remember, I mean, most of these women are about 5 foot. If you're 5'2", you're tall. And they're wearing men's uniforms, Linda Reich speaks about, she has a smock on that goes all the way to the ground, and that's what she's supposed to wear, and she's supposed to pull pants up and they go past her head. You know, it's that they're put in men's clothing, and then they lose their periods, and you know, it's just, it is not dehumanization, it's dewomanizing, right? It takes away your beauty, your sexuality. And then we have, you know, Hess writing this amazing piece in his diary where he actually blames the women, you know, when they, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it pretty much sounds like, well, you know, those women, when they got sick, they really let themselves go. And it's like, you know, you put them in this position, they're ill, they're starving, and they're not supposed to be, you know, it's just absolutely shocking to me. That line really blew me away.
It's propaganda,
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
So you talk about some of the women who were ill, or I think Irena Fine was limping, and one of the doctors in the second transport was able to work with another block elder to hide her number using a dead body. Can you talk about some of the survival strategies? I mean, how did these women survive 3 winters in Auschwitz?
This is a great story. So Irena Fine is one of Edith's friends, and Bertha Berkowitz, right? Yes, Fanny's sister. Bertha Berkowitz worked in the Lycan Commando taking bodies out. And Block 22 was the sick block where you know, you went there and there was a one-way out, right? And Irena Fine had frostbite, and so she was well, but she was going to lose a toe. She was going to lose her toes, or I think her pinkies. She was going to lose her pinkies, and so she's in there. And Bertha and the other, and I'm guessing that let me see who was in there. I think Margaret Kulik was in this group because I know she worked in the Lycan Commando shortly. They walk in and they recognize Irena Fine. And they do some quick finagling. Now, Bertha is not she just says that this happened. She didn't know how it happened. I'm guessing because Ella Friedman was Dr. Mengeley's scribe. And she became responsible for writing down numbers of the dead and women coming in and out. And Irena, in her testimony, says that Ella, who had been a block elder, Ella changed her with a dead body, and Irena walked out with the Lycan Commando. And Bertha says, this girl who I didn't know grabbed hold of a stretcher and walked out with us. So these are like, I'm sort of pulling these bits and pieces from separate testimony and going, okay, we've got Ella here, right? And Irena knows Ella, and you know, and it just started to put it together. And so I think that that's how Irena Fine got out of Block 22. She later saved Edith on the death march. So it's like one of those, you know, beschert, right?
So can you talk a little bit about all the different jobs that they did in Auschwitz? Because I'm not, when we say how did they survive determination, courage, or luck, part of it is in terms of the assignments at work. For example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Primo Levi, who shared how, you know, for 6 months he had worked outside. He would never have survived if he hadn't been reassigned as a chemist to indoor work. Yeah. So if you could just talk a little bit about how some of the women, especially those who survived, you know, were able to have jobs either very unpleasant but still less difficult,
and
like
Bertha
carrying
Berkowitz
bodies
is a really good example of that because she worked in the Lycan Commando, and she took that position in the Lycan Commando because she didn't like to be cold, and she knew if she had to work outside, it was going to kill her, and she figured that she could put up with it because she would get an extra piece of bread. And so
and everyone understands the Lycan Commando was collecting the dead bodies and carrying the dead, very unpleasant.
Right. And then we had working in Canada. So Ida worked in Canada. Where did your mother work, Belle and Celia? She was in Canada, Regina, and probably, yeah. Right. Right. Well, there wasn't a sorting detail in the very beginning. It was just demolition of buildings and horrible. And then they began to sort the clothes. And all of these move back and forth. You don't have, if you're very lucky, you have one job, but most of them didn't. So you had sorting details, you had working outside. Edith and her sister were in the swamp cleaning detail, which was one of the worst, because you had to work in cold water or hot water and literally pull garbage out of swamps and ditches. And it's probably why Edith ended up with tuberculosis, which she was disabled from after the war. So then we had, there was kitchen details, there was sewing details, there were the office details, those were the best, of course. And then there was Harmen's, which was a farm, and the survivor who I just discovered in Sydney actually worked on Harmen's for most of her time. So it'll be very interesting to talk to her because I know very little about Harmen's. There's only one other survivor I know who was in Harmen's.
And I remember you also talked about someone raising rabbits, and
that's
then
Harmen's.
that's
the
Harmen's,
farm.
and then
Yeah.
women, 6 women and 2 Nazi officers going around and cleaning.
Yeah,
the
cleaning out
homes
the houses of the
of
Nazis. or
SS
cleaning the
wives,
houses.
so
Yeah.
they would get the food that was left over in the cupboards.
It was all about food.
And in the kitchen, it wasn't always a good place to work because you also had to be careful about being burned, which could happen fairly easily with the giant pots. So, but it is important to think about these sort of nuances and intimacies and relationships and bartering in terms of how women survived Auschwitz.
If you had a good job, and early on, Linda Reich says this, everybody needed underwear. And she would sneak as much underwear as she could. But she used to say, when you have thousands of people who need underwear and you can only, sneak 10 a day, you can't clothe everybody. and in the beginning, they helped each other. Margie Becker gave Edith a pair of shoes. Then it also became a bartering system. You had to give up your bread to get something because you're starving, and why am I going to do you a favor? But then if you had a friend, right? So Rena and Danka had very good friends in the Drenger cousins, and they were in Canada, and they would, one of them snuck out underwear for them to wear. It makes your life a little bit easier, and that can make a big difference.
Yeah. Although, again, a risk, because if you're caught smuggling.
If you get caught, you get lashes. You get lashes. Or to the gas.
So thinking a little bit more about the significance of the book, how did it affect you to return to Slovakia and Poland with
Tammy and Sharon? Yeah. It was amazing, and if you haven't gone to Eastern Europe, it's a really, it is beautiful. I love traveling in Poland and Slovakia, and seeing these actual places, the historic places, is really, really powerful, really, really meaningful, especially if you have a connection to the country. Yeah, I just.
Was that your first trip to Auschwitz?
In 2012, it was, yeah. And then I kept going back. The nice thing, my husband's British, the nice thing about living in England is I can get on like Ryanair, and literally, I have a friend who's a diplomat. She was working in Warsaw. It cost me $14 to go to Warsaw. And everybody was joking, are you coming back after lunch? So it's super, super inexpensive. So I can travel there quite a lot very easily.
Throughout the book, and you might have noticed when you walked in the Maya Angelou quote, you refer to slavery, slave ships, the African American, Native American experience, quoting Wilma Mankiller, the Cherokee Nation, sexism is like racism, it's very dehumanizing. To what extent do you consider Auschwitz and the Holocaust unique? And to what extent are you trying to draw universal lessons?
Well, that's a big question, but bottom line is, and Maya once again says that no human being has the right to tell another human being that they're less than human. period. And to me, that's the lesson of the Holocaust. It's the lesson of all genocides, and it's a lesson we're still learning today, unfortunately. And we're going to play a quick clip of Edith, and actually, that's a good moment for us to do that, because I think that sort of answers this question.
Because we'll be able to transition to the audience Q&A as well.
We're going to do a
afterwards.
Q&A in a minute, but I wanted to bring Edith in on this, and you can ask questions also of our survivors. Yeah. Okay. All right, we're rolling.
Dear readers, please, 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 you have to understand that a war is the worst thing that can happen to humanity. Please, please, I want you to understand that we don't have a winner in a war. Even the winners are losing kids, losing houses,
And losing it.
and losing everything. That's not a win. These I would like to give to you to understand, to your heart and not to your ear. So you can hate each other, but not kill each other. Thank you for listening, and I love you all. I love people. How could people that I love be so bad? I don't know. Who is listening to me?
To Edith, right? Yeah. Thank you.
So should I go around perhaps and, okay. So we'd like to open it up to questions.
And to our families.
Just raise your hand if you have a question, and I will come to you.
Survivors, for myself,
Hi.
Hi, thank you. That's been wonderful, and I'm really, if you can say, enjoying this. I was intrigued, the very first slide had Gross, which is one of my names in Bardajov. And I'm wondering if there's a way I can work with you, or you can direct me to people to get more information. I did lose people. Peppy Friedman I lost, who, again, I was told was on one of these Auschwitz trains. So is there a way to work with you?
Yeah, I was really lucky to have help typing up the first transport list, so that it's an Excel sheet, so it's really easy for me to check. Otherwise, it's not alphabetical, and it can take forever. But I'm happy to check, and in fact, I have my computer around here someplace. But you could also email me, and you can contact me through my website or 999thebook.com. You can click on that contact. And I need maiden name, I need birth year if you have it, and I need town. So that's one way of finding first transport. I can't help with the other, but you should definitely contact Yad Vashem and ask them. And I have a great researcher at the Holocaust Museum in DC who I was just working with 2 months ago on another project that I'm interested in, and he gave me a lot of information that I hadn't seen before. But the other thing is we have the Gross family here, so go meet them, and you can be an honorary Gross with me. We're all in it together, absolutely. Yeah. Hold on one second.
I'm not understanding about the mail. There was mail communication? There were the postcards?
The postcards, yes. So
how did that work?
She worked for the Gestapo. Lenka Hertzka was, and her mother and sister were living with the Hartman family. They were cousins. And the Hartman family had a big farm, and so they were hiding with the Hartman family, and their daughter was working in Prešov when she was deported. And she was I guess she was a secretary. She got picked up by one of the Gestapo, and she was in his office in Auschwitz, and they allowed her to send cards and to receive mail. They also, yes, well, in the very beginning, you were forced to write a postcard. In fact, Bertha had to write a postcard, and the first one she wouldn't write because it was on the Sabbath, and she had her friend write it. And then she wrote the next one. Those were all, they would try to sneak codes in, but they were told what to write, right? These the postcards that Lenka Hertzka, and she received mail, so her sister Lily would write to her, her mother would write to her, and they're all addressed Birkenau, and which it feels very strange to see Birkenau on a stamp and an address. But yeah, the amount of mail that came through, it started to slow down in 44. But there is, 50 or 60 postcards and letters. There's letters too.
In some of the postcards, they refer to like receiving like cheese and chocolate and some small items. They were allowed to send it.
No. Lenka, actually, she sends a postcard to her uncle saying, "Send me sardines from Portugal." It's like, really? But yeah, so that, if you had a higher privilege, you could. I know I didn't actually ever get to speak to somebody who worked in the mailroom, but I do know that girls that worked in the mailroom, what would happen is that if mail came in and that survivor, if a package came in and that survivor had died, they would smuggle those foodstuffs to the hospital so that the ill prisoners could get extra food. So there was a post office. I mean, Birkenau was a city. Auschwitz-Birkenau was a city, right? It was enormous. It was like 15 square miles.
It's important to remember that Auschwitz is both a labor camp and a death camp. It's not like Treblinka and Belzec and Sobibor. It's complex. There's different sites with different kinds of factory and personnel. Also, March 42, the Nazis are still early in the final solution. Gassing is just beginning at one of the camps. And so there's still that emphasis on deception, which in some cases goes through the whole war, but they want the girls to write postcards home to maintain this myth that these Slovakian girls, single girls, have been taken, and not the whole family, because it's a labor position. And then the third thing that's very important to remember, besides the privilege of the work details, is language. The Jews that were sent to the death camps, particularly Auschwitz, that spoke German, like from Slovakia, were at a distinct advantage. They could work directly with the German, with the SS. They could help the SS by translating for other prisoners. Whereas, for example, when the Jews from Greece get to Auschwitz, no one can help them. Even the other Jewish prisoners don't speak Greek. So language is another one of those skills that enables survival. All of these nuances is why it's very important to read lots of books about Auschwitz to see all the different dimensions. But always remembering that it's industrial style killing, that it's that Birkenau is a death camp. Yeah.
Do you know how many survived from the first?
I do not know how many survived. So in Slovakia, the guess was about 20 survived, but that was probably about the number that got back to Slovakia. A lot of people didn't go back. So Joan Rosner, she was like, there's nobody alive. I'm going to America. She got hold of her aunt, Rena and Danka Kornreich. There's nobody left in Poland. We're going to Holland. So some people turned around and went home. Did your sister, they went back just for a little bit? Bertha and Fanny went back, and I love the story. When you got to Bratislava, Bertha says that they were supported by the JDC, and the food wasn't great, but it was kosher. I love that. So they stayed in Sweden for 18 months, and then they went back, and then moved to America. And did your mom go back to Poland? Or yeah.
I'm not sure if Mom went back to her birthplace, but she did find out that her uncle had survived the war. He had survived in hiding in Slovakia, and he had a remarkable employee. He had a business before the war, and his employee kept the business going for him, and he came back, and the employee gave him back the business. And my mother found her cousin Mendel, and the most meaningful thing that I can share really is, and I know Sharon knows it too, is when Mom found Mendel, and Mendel's wife and 2 daughters survived as Aryans. They did not have they had an Aryan look, and there was money because of the business. They were able to get papers, so they actually lived, I don't know how, they must have been terrified the whole time. So when Mom showed up, he said, "Ida, your parents are no longer alive. I will be your father." It was.
Thank you. So my question, I think maybe about 100. Right, yeah. I think around the world, we probably had about 100 survivors. That's my guess, because there's a large contingent in Australia that there's never been so people went sort of all over, and actually nobody's ever tried to recreate it until now, and now most of the people are dead. We have 5 that are still alive now that I'm sure of. Yeah, yes. Your mom is counted in. I think there's 22 Shoah testimonies. Dagmar, did your mom go back to Slovakia?
She went back. Her home was there. Matter of fact, she brought 2 friends with her from Auschwitz to see the home that she grew up in. She had a brother who was there. He was in hiding during the war, and he took over. They had given the family business to a Gentile person, and he gave back the business to my uncle and the home, but my mother and my aunt left. We came to America on the last ship before the communists closed Czechoslovakia. We were on the last ship out. So one of the things, my husband has a saying that coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. And things don't just happen that way. I've spoken to other people. There was a man from my mother's town who I found out through his son recently. I said, "What happened?" He was in my mother's class in school. And I said, "Where was your father during the war?" And he said to me, "My father happened to have been in jail. I know his family, they're a religious family. He wasn't in jail for murdering or something, I don't know what. Maybe it was a business, white-collar crime, who knows?" And he said, because my father was in jail, when they came to the house to get him, he wasn't there to be had. So who would think that someone's good fortune was to have been in jail? And he bribed his way out, and he went to Hungary, and they didn't come to Hungary till 44.
One of my favorite stories is that Edith was married to a very famous screenwriter and novelist, and they used to hang out with Rudolf Verba, who had escaped from Auschwitz. And Rudy said to them, "I'm going on vacation to the West, and I think you should too." And Edith looked to her husband and said, "Do you think he's going to escape?" And he said, "Auschwitz couldn't hold him. You think the communists can? We're going on vacation." And they got in the car too, and they drove across the border. But that was like 1965, but they were there for quite a while. Also, Ria Hans, it took her, God, how much did she weigh? She weighed almost nothing. It was like 60 pounds or something. She was very, very thin, very ill, and it took her over 2 months to get back to Humana. And that's what she told. And her sister didn't recognize her when she arrived back. It was quite a journey. I mean, it's Ulyssian. The journeys home are almost another book because the travel is so difficult at that point. I want to pause for a minute, and Fanny. It's very late for you. But what can you tell? Can you tell us about when you were hiding and they came in and you hid under the bed?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, yeah, I was impressed by a friend, something I was learning. And he came from school and he said, go hide into the bed because the German coming. German coming. I went into the bed. And I was there not the whole day, but till afternoon. Afternoon, there were downstairs was not a Jewish family. So they went, so I went there. I was in the room. They know it already, but it's going on. They always said, oh, they sent the Jewish back, they go taking him back to Auschwitz or what. And then at night, they find a attic, but it was across the street. So they put me on a coat and a hat, and they took me to this house. And I was there, and then attic, 16 months. And at night, we were playing cards, and the day we were sleeping because we didn't want it to
They caught your elder sister, right, while you were hiding under the bed?
No, she wasn't in the bed. She was in a closet, yeah. The closet, in the German went by with a cane, and she was very she was always afraid for everything. Right. So she was, she said, "Yoy." So they took her. Yeah.
Can you tell us, because I've never heard this story, after the war, when Bertha found you, Bertha was in Bergen-Belsen, right?
Yes.
And can you tell us how you found your sister after
the war? The people, Rabbi, that was for Pesach time, before Pesach, and they went to, where was that, Bertha? In Bergen-Belsen, yeah. And I was in, where was I? Oh yeah, I was in Lippstadt. So what happened? They brought from the Hiroshima a list from Bergen-Belsen to Lippstadt. And I saw my sisters there, and they're going to my sister. So what should I do? They didn't want to take me, so they went in a they went in a huh? Red Cross. Yeah. Like an ambulance, yeah. So they sit in the front, and I go with the back, with the door, and I went onto the table, chair, and I was there an hour, 2 hours, till we came to Bergen-Belsen.
Right. So you snuck into. You were gutsy. A lot of chutzpah.
I came to Bergen-Belsen, and I went to the door, and I said, I'm looking for Bertha Berkowitz. He said, oh, yeah, she's here, come on, everybody. Lenka Greenwald, yeah. She's with her friend. We were in Slovakia also. Yeah. Lenka, yeah. I don't know where she's now.
And what did you do? Was Bertha just shocked to see you? Was she?
Yeah. It was crying.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And then you found your brother. Part of this, when you got to back to Bratislava, you learned that your brother was still alive. Yes. And Bertha says that you wrote to him, and he came back and he said, I am now your papa, right? He was going to take care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a soldier in Russia, and he was a parachutist. So he flew, they let him down in Slovakia, the Russian. And he went to our house, and they said, everybody should give me back what you have, and not, I have a gun. So,
Do you have any messages for us? What do you want us to know? What do you want this audience to know right now? Because we're going to wrap up and it's late.
Yeah. Well, it's always think the best and try to learn. When not today, tomorrow will be better. I think that's the best thing that we can say.
Do you want to wrap it up, or maybe we have time for one more question? No. I think we could take one more question and then call it a night. So I saw a hand here.
Yes, I am from Slovakia.
Where?
From Košice, and I was wondering if you ever had a chance to go visit that city and speak to some of the survivors.
I was, I think I went through Košice, right? Yeah, I went through Košice. I can't remember, because it's not far from Humana, is it?
Not far.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
far,
So
no.
but I didn't stop because it was a whirlwind. No.
Yeah,
but I think Jure, you were in Košice. I think Jure Grossman, right? Yeah. Jure Grossman, do you know Jure?
I know Grossman family.
Yeah.
I escaped from there 40 years ago in 1979 from the communists.
Yeah, yeah, they're still there now. They
Yeah,
are.
so then-
And you've been to Košice, Celia? She was just there this summer. You want to stand up?
Yes.
So I was just there this summer, and I will say that I
Did you have a chance to go visit the synagogue? Yeah.
I just want to say, they actually renovated the synagogue and they
Yes.
did total renovation this spring. And there was a memorial, close to 100 people were there.
Nice.
From Israel. So it was just, I actually had a bar mitzvah in 1963 in that synagogue.
Wonderful. I am very much responsible for everything what's happening in Košice. I had a teacher when I was a kid growing up during the communism. He was a dwarf, Mengeles personal artist in Auschwitz.
Wow.
And he survived. He returned to Košice. And he was going to be forgotten, but somehow I got involved, and now he has a gallery. He has a sculpture. He has a park named after him. It's just amazing. Students, schools are coming there, people from all over the world. And
I'll have to go my next trip.
yeah, and I wrote a book about him, and of course my mother, the whole family, about my escape. And it's just amazing.
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, go visit. Košice is beautiful. It's got a very rich Jewish history, and if you're interested about my book, it's called Dirty Jewess. Yeah, Dirty Jewess. Dirty Jewess. Yeah, it's on Amazon.
I think we should
It's
wrap up.
been published in Israel. It's few
You?
languages. So, but it's the history of Slovakian Jews who remained behind the Iron Curtain.
No,
We need to wrap up, actually. I know that there are a lot of questions and very interesting stories in this room, but I welcome you all to come downstairs to our lobby, ask questions there, also buy Heather's books, get them signed, and thank you all very much for coming. Thank you, Heather Dune.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And
Thank
also,
you.
one more note, on March 11th, we're also having an event called Heroines of the Holocaust, also with Dr. Lori Weintraub. Come back. More information on the back table.
I just want to put one, if anybody is interested in donating to the film, we are raising money for editing. We're in our rough cut, and it is a tax deductible donation to my foundation. Thank you.